Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die: A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, my home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find things like medium classes. You can attend our free Sunday gathering inspirational service with medium demonstration included. If you want to scroll to the bottom of the page at wedon'tdie.com and enter your name and email address, you'll be on my email list, but in exchange, you get a copy of my book and some really surprising good afterlife things I think you'd like. Our guest today is Dr. Bob Davis, former professor, neurosensory research scientist, film producer, and author. He has published 4 books and over 60 articles in scholarly journals and presented numerous lectures worldwide. His books include The UFO Phenomena, Should I Believe? Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. Unseen Forces, the integration of science, reality, and you. And his 4th book, The Consciousness Connection, Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality, which has been turned into a documentary film titled The Consciousness Connection, which is now streaming on Gaia.com. We invite you to check out Bob's website, which is bobdavisspeaks.com. Find out information on the film at consciousnessfilm.info. You can also watch the film through the link at consciousness.media. Let's find out more about Bob in his own words. Dr. Bob Davis, welcome to We Don't Die.
Oh, Sandra, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you again. It's only been 7 years. I wish we could do it more frequently, but I'm truly a big fan of you. Your book is fantastic, and I love your show.
Thank you for your kind words. And I was so delighted to see everything that you've been up to. And you're like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep going and going with good messages. Many people have not heard our earliest interview from 7 years ago. Would you mind taking us on a walk through memory lane? Tell us a little bit about yourself and then what got you interested in all these incredible fields that relate to, well, the bigger
Well,
picture of life and death.
as you mentioned, I was an academician for 3 decades at the State University of New York. I always had an open mind. I always followed the ufology. I saw 2 orange orbs in the night sky, which led me to write my book, The UFO Phenomenon. But then I had, let me see, 2 years later, I had a shared death experience, which you could also call it an empathic death experience that led me to write the book, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence, which we discussed on our show 7 years ago. 2 years after that, I had a Kundalini awakening, which led me to write this book, Unseen Forces, the integration of science, reality, and you, which you mentioned. Thank you. And I got a phone call from a producer at Dreamtime Entertainment down here in Fort Myers, Florida, and he met with me for lunch, and he said, let's turn this into a documentary, which we did. And it's now streaming, as you mentioned, on consciousness.media. You can try their 7-day free trial and watch the film there. But during the 2 years that we were producing the film, interviewing many experts in the area of near-death experiences like Bruce Grayson, Jeff Long, Eben Alexander, you know these names, and you've had them on as guests, I know. I wrote the last book, which you mentioned, this 500-page, if you don't mind me showing this 500-page book, the Consciousness Connection, which basically takes us on a ride through the documentary. It's a detailed discussion of things that relate to consciousness, near-death experiences, mediumship, ESP, consciousness, the brain, all things paranormal, and everything in between. So now I need a break. I'm burned out. And talking to you is making me feel a lot better. So
Oh, that makes me happy. For those of you who are listening and are not watching our YouTube video, the Consciousness Connection book, 500 pages, it's a big, thick book. It's like a Bible of all things more than afterlife, who we are.
I don't have much of life, so I just spent hours every day, over a 2-year period writing, and it was cathartic. I was in pain, I'll be honest with you, and it took my mind off the pains. Had surgery since, I'm out of pain, and everything is fine. But the book was a blessing in many ways.
And what a gift it is to others and the film as well. So, Bob, lots of our listeners and viewers, there are folks, a lot of new people have joined us. Welcome, everybody. But there's a loved one who has passed, or two, or a child, or someone very near and dear, hoping that today on our episode, they'd hear something that could lead them to believe that their loved one is still alive. Would you like to share just some of the things that you're most passionate about as far as reasons to believe in the afterlife?
The thing that moves me the most is critical perceptions during a near death as well as an out of body experience. And these vertical perceptions, or call them verifiable perceptions, that these are cases that involve individuals having a near death experience. We'll call them NDEs, of course, in which they encounter deceased individuals that they were not aware who had passed away. And these are jewels of evidence that increase the validity of NDE reports and are significant in research in near-death experiences as objective evidence that goes beyond subjective accounts. Because all we hear are anecdotal evidence, and a lot of skeptics don't buy that. But individuals who report these vertical perceptions provide accurate and very specific details about physical surroundings, their conversations, events that take place while they are unconscious or so-called clinically dead. Flat EEG and a flat EKG for a period of time before they are revived. And that confirmation is crucial in distinguishing a vertical perception from mere hallucinations or just a simple byproduct of the brain. When we were doing our interviews for our film, The Consciousness Connection, we attended the International Association of Near-Death Studies in Washington, D.C., where an array of elite researchers were there giving papers. And I talked with Bruce Grayson, probably the leading NDE researcher, a psychiatrist who told me a story, and it's going to be actually in our next film. And he was saying that when he was an intern, while he was eating spaghetti sauce, he accidentally spilled the sauce on his tie. He suddenly got a call on his pager, an emergency, and he wiped the ketchup, whatever it was, the sauce off the tie as much as he can, but he couldn't get rid of it completely. He went down to see the patient, who was completely unconscious, in his opinion, actually close to death. He then left her, walked several rooms down the hall, and spoke to the patient's friend to get more information about the patient. The next day, he sees that patient, and she's wide awake. And he's talking to her, and he's evaluating her from a psychiatric standpoint. And she says to him, "I remember you. You visited me last night." And he says, "That's not possible. You're completely unconscious. You were comatose. I know what you said to my friend." And she relayed exactly their conversation. And she said, and you had that red stain on your tie, didn't you? And from that moment on, he knew that there was something quite special about near-death experiences. That started him. That started him on the road to researching near-death experiences after hearing that validation from someone who's in a coma, yet reporting accurate information when it's deemed impossible. Another story he told me, um, he had a he had a patient who his name was Jack, I believe, and he was admitted in the hospital with respiratory distress. He had severe pneumonia, and while while he was in poor condition, his nurse Anita said to Jack, "Listen, Jack, I have to go away for the weekend. I can't take care of you, but I'm going to have another nurse who's exceptional. She's going to be with you and watch you closely." During that time, while Anita was gone, he had a near-death experience, found himself in a beautiful pastoral scene, and there, to his surprise, was his nurse, Anita, and she came walking towards him, and he did a double take and said, "Anita, what are you doing here?" And she said, "Jack, you need to go back. I want you to go and find my parents. Tell them I love them very much and that I'm sorry I wrecked the red MGB." Now, this red MGB was a fancy car, and this was back in the 70s in South Africa, where there weren't many red MGBs around. When Jack woke up in the hospital, he told the first nurse that he saw about the experience, that he interacted with Anita and what Anita told him. That nurse, upon hearing that story, began crying and ran out of the room. Jack was then told that Anita took that weekend off to celebrate her 21st birthday, and her parents surprised her with a gift of a red MGB car. She got so excited that she jumped in the car, took it for a test spin, unfortunately crashed it into a tree or telephone pole and died immediately. Now, there is no way that Jack could have known how she had died or that she even did die, yet he relayed that story to the nurse. Now, that more than convinced Bruce Grayson that vertical perceptions are remarkably real and provide 100% certainty that near-death experiences represent a piercing of the veil, so to speak, of an afterlife, or at least an out-of-body experience where you are still experiencing reality despite your body's sensory systems being completely shut down. And there are many instances of these kinds of vertical perceptions, these jewels of evidence that, in my mind, are the most convincing aspects of near-death experiences, proving to me that this is not a phenomenon, but it is real. It is real, and the consistency of the reports, with some variation, is remarkable. It's like Eben Alexander. He tells a story about when he had his NDE, when he's giving him practically a 0% chance of living because of his bacterial meningitis. He said during his NDE, he was flying on the wings of a butterfly with a woman. I think you know the story, Sandra. And uh, was it after his NDE, he received a photograph, I think it was 4 months afterwards, a picture of a woman who was his deceased sister. He didn't know he had a sister before he was born. And that picture of that woman was the exact person who accompanied him flying on the butterfly wings. So here again, that more than proved to him that that veridical perception validated his experience. So I can go on and on with these kinds of stories, but I'm sure there's a book on vertical perceptions. If there isn't, there should be one. And if there isn't, I'm going to write one, because this is the most convincing evidence that NDE are indeed real.
I think you should write one. I know there's one on the way. Someone had emailed me. They're writing one. Would I interview them when it comes out? Absolutely. And I know that there are books that chapters include some, but I can't get enough of those stories. NDEs are great. And there's, for as many people who have had them, there's different experiences. And I know there's the light, the tunnel, seeing loved ones and things. That's all wonderful. But to really convince someone, how is it possible that when we're flatlined on a table that we can be somewhere else with just as much clarity, or even the work of Ken Ring, right? Blind people who never had vision can see.
And there's a study done with I believe 10 to 12 people who were blind from birth, and their experiences during their NDEs are obviously quite unique because they don't have any sense of vision. But Jeff Long, during my interview with him, Jeff Long is the founder of the Near-Death Experiencer Research Foundation. NDERF.org is a website people should go to read stories about NDEs and vertical perceptions and all that. It's a remarkable collection of thousands of NDE anecdotal evidence that would be a perfect master's thesis or dissertation for anybody wanting to study it. But I said to him, if there's one incident, NDE that is, that made you a believer that this experience is real, what would it be? And he says, if I had to pick an NDE experience, it would have to be about a woman named Vicky, who was born completely blind. And you can't explain vision to somebody born totally blind. And for the first time in her life, she saw herself. She was having an out-of-body experience during her near-death experience. I forgot what led to her accident and her NDE, but her consciousness was above her, and her initial emotion, not surprisingly, was fear. Vision was completely unknown, unfamiliar to her. So she didn't know what she was looking at. And then she said to Jeff Long, you know, during my near-death experience, I was able to see in front of me, on my right, on my left, and behind me. I had 360-degree vision, which means, being simultaneously aware of everything that's going on all around you. And Jeff Long had to explain to her, well, as people who are not, not blind, have eye sockets, and are able to only see in front and to the left and right, not behind. But she laughed and laughed, and Jeff found that to be humorous, because she couldn't understand how we have this pie-shaped visual field because of the location of our eye sockets in our skull. And there are other cases too of individuals who are blind. Um, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross writes about this, who have similar experiences where they do, because of their NDE, are able to have visual perception just during that period of time. Now, uh, to Jeff, that was convincing, more than convincing, that blind people who are experiencing sight despite having detached retinas makes completely no sense at all. And him being a radiation oncologist, he's well aware of anatomy and physiology, and that's what motivated him to co-found the Near Death Experiencer Research Foundation after hearing experiences like this.
These are very credible people, very credible people. And I think, it's my understanding, the Sandra that is looking at you through Zoom right now, I'm approaching 59 years old, and I still feel like the same me that I was in my 20s. Before my grandmother passed, close to 91, she still felt like the same her. That moment that we pass, or if we have a near death experience, we're still us. Except for maybe not looking at a pie-shaped piece, we've got the 360 vision. So I feel when we cross and all those good things happen, we're reunited with loved ones and things, we're still us. And then when you take cases of like terminal lucidity, where people are near brain dead and just moments before life, they regain full memory, full consciousness, they're talking to the people that are in the room. How does one explain that if we are just our brains?
We can't explain terminal lucidity, but it is a real phenomenon. It's well regarded and acknowledged among the medical community. People could be hours, days, or even weeks before they pass, suddenly regain full consciousness, even after years of having severe Alzheimer's or a stroke or something that is severely impairing their capability of functioning, where they can't interact with people for a long period of time. But just prior to death, they regain full consciousness and act as if everything is normal. They're lucid, they'll sing, they'll engage in conversation, and then, despite their acting normal to the astonishment of the family, they'll soon thereafter pass away. Terminal lucidity is often an indication that the person is going to die very soon, but we can't explain why that happens. It's maybe the last hurrah of the brain, um, but it's you really can't explain it. Neuroscientists can't explain terminal lucidity, at least not yet. But it gives the family the last moment of opportunity to interact with their loved one in a way in which they wished for. Despite the person soon dying thereafter, they had the person as they were before they had, cognitive deficits or a stroke. And it is a great relief and benefit to those loved ones.
It's miraculous and gives so much hope. And people experience similar things often before they pass. They call it rallying. You hear these stories. I'm sure your investigations have taken you to deathbed visitations and visitors. And often they rally and they're bright and alert and they're talking to their deceased mom or dad or someone they love. From my understanding, very often the loved ones say, "We're going to go on a trip. Get ready." And they look as clear as you and I look.
Yes, that's true. Um, you just mentioned something that struck an idea in my mind. Not terminal lucidity, but
The deathbed visions,
deathbed.
rallying.
Yes, deathbed visions. There's a study done that of hospice workers. Approximately, if my memory serves me right, 80 to 90% of hospice workers said that it is most unusual for a person who is in the process of dying, is most unusual to not have a deathbed vision. It is common. Sometimes they even see yeah, a deceased member of the family sitting on the bed, as if to give comfort to the person who is in the process of dying, um, uh, assisting them in a sense, giving them comfort. And deathbed visions, where people who are in the process of dying will point to the corner of the ceiling of a room and note a heavenly realm, deceased people. It'll communicate with the people from the other side. They act as if they are interacting with a heavenly, unearthly realm of existence. And to the members of the family who are observing this, they're perplexed, obviously. They don't understand what's going on. They regard it as an hallucination, but it is much more common than not. And people should not be overly surprised if their loved one who is in the process of dying, reaches up as if they're ready to go and say, "Take me, I'm ready," uh, or acknowledging the heavenly realm and feeling a sense of love and compassion from others who are there to support them during their transition.
We live in such an intelligent world, universe, whatever, Bob. Even just thinking, if I cut my finger, the body knows how to heal itself. Why wouldn't our birth, which is a celebration, people here, but that our passing, the intelligence of no one dies alone, that people come to greet us? It it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, people do come to greet us, and it's not an hallucination. It certainly minimizes the pain and the suffering, emotionally, that is, of the person who is going through that experience. And they can get hints of that days, weeks before they pass, where they will interact or with the deceased through dreams and otherwise. So is this they're being prepared for the transition, building up towards the very end. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, uh, but it happens often enough, and studies do reveal a fairly high percentage of cases where terminally ill people will have these deathbed visions of varying types.
And
And
there's some veridical ones as well. There's numerous studies that I've read, and even a gentleman that I talked to before his dad passed, he could see into the afterlife. He was naming people that were dead that he was never told they were dead. They happened to die when he was sick or in a coma, and they didn't want to tell him about it. He's seeing them and talking to them.
well, Sandra, that's the hallmark of the vertical perception, that independent corroboration of information that they are expressing. And it often comes down to just that. They interact with deceased uh, um, people that, yes, they did not know they had died. And when they mentioned that they had interacted with and Jim on the other side, and they'll say, how did you know Jim had died? Says, I didn't know Jim died, but I interacted with him. This is too not uncommon. So we have these vertical perceptions that come in many different forms, and it gives me a great deal of hope, although you can't be 100% convinced. At least my materialist mindset still leaves me that 1% of doubt about the possibility of an afterlife. But it's always been 50-50 in my mind. But after I had a shared death experience and my Kundalini awakening, I then went from 50-50 to 99% convinced. I had a shared death experience that, if you don't mind,
Please tell us.
Andrea, I'll share it. One morning I awoke with a lucid dream that was more horrific than I've ever experienced in my entire life. I was dying. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating and truly upon death's door. And it was so vivid and real. I never had such a hyper realistic experience like that. And it moved me considerably. But during that experience, Sandra, I had a knowingness that my colleague who worked with me in my laboratory had passed away. It was just a knowingness, a strong feeling. I didn't think much of that. I was just kind of overwhelmed by the experience alone as I was driving to work, thinking about what happened to me. Did I eat something bad or good? Maybe, I don't know, but I couldn't explain it. When I put the key in the door of my lab, turned the knob and opened it up, I saw the faces of my colleagues, and I knew right away that what the information I received during my lucid dream was in fact real. My dear friend and colleague Anne did pass away that morning at that time, and I confirmed the time of her passing with her son at her funeral, and it was essentially the same time that I had that shared death experience. And it was, I guess you can call it empathic, because we was very, very close as professional colleagues, but also as friends. And we would often talk about spirituality, near-death experiences, things that are more or less unconventional, at least non-traditional. But she was a very spiritual person, and I knew she was giving me that information. I knew it. I knew it, and that's why I wrote that book, Life After Death: An Analysis of the Evidence, which brought me to your show 7 years ago. And I can't forget it to this day. And then 2 years after that, I had a Kundalini awakening, getting off the topic a little bit from NDEs, but not so much. I'm not going to go into great detail about a Kundalini awakening, but but it's an energetic spiritual awakening that people experience, and it can come on for a variety of reasons. Uh, this woman, through intention alone, somehow was sending me energy that was causing my body to vibrate uncontrollably. I literally looked like, what was her name? Reagan in the movie The Exorcist,
Yes.
writhing. I mean, I could mimic it now, but it would look too foolish for your audience. But my head would turn, however, as extreme as possible in this direction. My facial muscles were contorting. Um, my breathing was irregular. If you were watching me, Sandra, you would think I was crying, dying, in great distress. But in my mind, I was experiencing extreme bliss. So there was this duality of mind, body. I was convinced at that time that it was happening, that I'm not my body. The Kundalini awakenings can provide you with that kind of insight, where you're not in control of your body, but your mind, however, is elsewhere, you know, and that's that's where I was. I was watching my body from a distance, and I could rationalize what was going on, but I was completely bewildered why my body was behaving that way, and I couldn't control it. But I kept on saying to the woman who was inducing this in me, I kept on doing this, give me more, because I felt so good. It was an energetic bliss. I encourage people to read about Kundalini awakening. If many people have never heard of Kundalini, but it is real. It is real. And in a way, it is related to the near death experience because we see the distinction between consciousness and the body. And I got a clear sense of it in my near death experience. And it was reinforced in my Kundalini awakening. And that's why I'm 99, maybe 99.5% certain that reality is far more complex than we can ever imagine. We get caught up so much in day-to-day routine aspects of life that we don't consider these possibilities of an afterlife, that there's a lot more that exists than what we deal with on a daily basis, and we have to but we can't lose sight of the fact that who have those loved ones who have deceased are are still around. I don't know if they're reincarnated in another body. I don't know if they're still not in the body, but they are aware. They are aware of you. They often interact with people, with their loved ones, not always, but there's people who are called um, encounter prone personalities or paranormal prone personalities. There are people who have antennas for the paranormal. And for some reason, there's people who see UFOs, they have NDEs, they have vertical perceptions, they have all of these different manifestations of what we call anomaly gaps, so to speak, or paranormal phenomena. And I don't like that term. We shouldn't call it paranormal. But the point is, I have great confidence that my deceased loved ones are still there, and I will talk to them, and I will try to listen to what they're saying, if they are saying anything. I haven't been convinced that I've received any messages from my deceased parents, but I know many people who have, and it's more real than a lucid dream. It's real as if they're talking to a family member. That's how convincing it is. So I have the utmost respect for people who have these experiences, and we need to learn from them and come to the realization that even though we have lost loved ones, we all have, and we will all perish. At least our body will. It's not the end. It's not the end.
Nope, just the beginning. Somebody had a quote that our life is just a thread in the fabric of our soul. This is just a small little part of the much bigger picture. And I think I don't even know when we migrate to the other side if we're gonna get the full picture of what's all possible. And Bob, I don't think as human beings we're meant to have that 100% knowing. Even me, it's been well over 20 years that I've witnessed the miraculous and explored and had my own psychic and medium experiences. These holy cow, amazing things. But I wake up in the morning with that doubting mind. So I don't know if this is the truth or not, but I like to say that our life on earth is an education for the soul and that we're here to learn and love and forgive and experience. And we got other people involved. And where we go to next is all perfect all of the time. And when we have the opposites here, this is when we can really learn and we can make a difference for other people. So I don't think we're meant to know that we're playing playing a game, a very difficult and
Well,
painful one at times.
very well said, and you're exactly right. And that's the ego. That's the left hemisphere of the brain. That's the part of the brain that doesn't give in. It reminds me of the book, The Stroke of Insight, written by a neuroanatomist who had a stroke. Left hemisphere was shut down, and she was just using her right hemisphere, and she felt like moving from a solid to a fluid uh, type of experience, feeling free, uh, feeling at one with the universe, feeling love, feeling empathy, compassion, becoming more humane. And she says she wishes everyone could experience just the right hemisphere, what that is all about. And that would, and she said, if everybody just had a right hemisphere instead of the egoic, logical left hemisphere that overanalyzes everything, that we would have peace on earth and goodwill towards humanity. And our brain, we're held hostage, truly, Sandra, to our brain. And it can be very misleading for us. Um, and unfortunately, it's hard to sometimes separate logic from illogic. And we like to tend to believe everything we read and hear. And we have to be very discriminating consumers, even when we read about near-death experiences and life after death. Not every book out there in the literature is going to give you accurate information. I would encourage people who want to learn more about near-death experiences to read books by people like Raymond Moody and Jeff Long and Bruce Grayson, and your book. I like to think maybe my books can also serve in that vein. They have to people have we all have to be very selective and discriminating as consumers every day of our lives, in a sense, because it's very easy to make these errors of inductive reasoning and come to a wrong decision or conclusion about something. But when it comes to NDEs, um, I'm not making a wrong decision by stating that NDEs are a real experience and it's a valid one, just like my Kundalini awakening and just like my shared death experience. They are valid and highly convincing.
And no one can ever take them away from you, ever, and try to convince you of something else. I like to tell people with all the interviews that I do, Bob, you can't believe everything. In fact, I get some guests sometimes and I'm thinking, wow, that's a little out there. However, different strokes for different folks. And just like you go into a department store and you try on different blazers or tops or something to see what fits, what feels good, what feels right, we're we all have these divine souls. We're part of divine souls, and we all have our own path to lead. So those things that aid to the quality of your life and add to your values and make sense and resonate with your soul, take them on. Sure.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah. And those things that seem too good to be true, just because somebody wrote about them in a book, right, doesn't mean they are true. So go with what fits right for your life that empowers you to live your best life. And anytime we can keep an eye on making a difference for another person, I think that always gives us some good brownie points as well, being human.
Well said, Sandra. And next week I'm showing my documentary, The Consciousness Connection. Again, consciousness.media is where people can go and watch the film using Gaia's 7-day free trial. Um, I'm showing the film to the community in which I reside. It's a plus 55 community. And the people who are coming uh, uh, are into consciousness, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, all the things we're talking about. But if people aren't interested in these kinds of topics, they're not going to find a documentary on this topic of interest. There's many skeptics out there, Yet even the most staunch skeptics will still say prayers over meals, prayers when they're ill, which seems a little contradictory because they're praying to a God, yet they're staunch materialists, strict materialists. Yet they believe in something that, I guess is faith-based, basically. We have no proof of God. However, when people have near-death experiences, they often bring that point up, that they do experience the presence of a supreme being, this, in addition to deceased loved ones, including pets, which are joyous reunions, obviously. But they also have a sense of the presence of God, and they feel the magnificent love, and to the point where they don't want to return home. They consider that home, not here, uh, unless they're told that they have to come back, usually to take care of a child or for some other important reason. So they reluctantly will return.
And they say this life seems like it was just a dream, and that's the reality.
Yes, it's like going home. And I guess I get a little bit of a sense of that when I had my Kundalini awakening. It felt right. It felt like this is the way people should feel, this kind of bliss. And I can't come up with a better term for that than bliss. I've heard it from others, so I steal it and use it myself. But it was a deep sense of love, of happiness, um, and I knew I wasn't my body, and I knew that it reminded me of my shared death experience, and it validated it. It went hand in hand, in a sense, with it. And why I started having these kinds of experiences after I retired, I don't know. But I never would have written these books, done this film. I wouldn't be here speaking to you if I didn't have these experiences. And that's true for many of your guests. They are experiencers and they feel a tremendous need to express it. You go down that so-called, I hate to use the term, but I'm going to use the term rabbit hole, but it does bring you down a different path in life. People make career changes on the basis of a near-death experience. They'll give up their 9 to 5 job to serve humanity more, come to the realization that life is not all about power, fame, and wealth, etc., but it's about helping others. It's about compassion, empathy, sympathy, caring for each other. And that's what happens to people who have near-death experiences. They are behaviorally transformed in such unique ways that they become, I guess you could say, more humane relative to where they were prior to their NDE. And of course, they don't fear death anymore. There's studies that have been done that show, was one study that said, what percent fear death? Something like 80% of the people feared death before they had their NDE. After their NDE, that 80% became zero. Another study showed the same thing, 0% doubt. They have no doubt that there's an afterlife after their NDE. They completely lose their fear of death. But they also, I mean, you could have distressing near-death experiences too. Let's not make this into a talk about this experience as being something that everybody should have. One, you're close to dying, and it may not be your time, which is curious enough and distressing enough. But there are distressing near-death experiences, and it occurs in about 10 to 15% of the time. where people just have a hellish experience. Um, Even children, however, PMH Outwater, we interviewed her. Children who have near-death experiences um, talk about the stream, going back to the stream. They don't have the right language terms to use, but the stream they mean is consciousness, and that they want to they can't get along with their parents. They don't see their parents as their real parents. They feel that they still belong in another reality. Um, uh, so childhood NDEs should be another book written, because it sets them up for a unique life thereafter.
I met a man on an airplane. He was sitting next to me, and we started talking about all kinds of things. And then, what do you do? What do you do? And I told him about the book, my book. And he told me a story, a guilt that he had that he wasn't able to let go of. And he said that his little boy was 3 or 4 years old, and his other son was, I don't remember the ages, but one boy was in the toilet at a campground. And this little boy ran down to the water and he tried to swim. And it only took 1 second before the father realized that he wasn't there. And of course, he had to be retrieved. He filled his lungs with water. And when the boy survived, but when he woke up in the hospital, the boy was telling the dad, he said, "I was okay, daddy." He says, "I was with the big face in the sky, the big face in the sun, the big face in the sun."
Uh-huh.
And he told me that I would be coming back and all that. So I'm listening to this like, "Oh my goodness." And so the father had this guilt that this had happened. And I said, now the son was about 16 years old when we were on the flight. And I said, "What kind of a young man did he turn into?" He makes his whole life about making a difference and volunteering and all that. So, we had a great conversation that ended up transforming his view of what had happened, and we talked about near-death experiences, but they
Yeah,
really can change lives and give people life and direction, and what's better than
they,
making a difference for others and dialing down that ego?
they're more humane, and they want to serve humanity in ways that are beneficial, um, not only to themselves, but more importantly to others, because they realize that that is what's most critical here on Earth, helping one another. Bruce Grayson, during our interview, um, he said that the near-death experience changes people overnight, transformatively, overnight. And he says, us psychiatrists, physicians, we can spend months, years treating these individuals, and we can't achieve what a near-death experience achieves almost automatically in terms of mental health, and in terms of their physical condition, because they benefit so greatly from their near-death experience. And look, 200,000 people alone in the United States have a near-death experience. I think worldwide, we're talking about is it, uh, 320 million people worldwide have had a near-death experience.
Oh
That's
my
right,
goodness.
worldwide. Now, 200,000 people in the United States alone per year have a near-death experience. Again, 10-15% are negative experiences, for reasons that I'm not clear on. But so this is fairly common, as well as out-of-body experiences too. And that's the first symptom of a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience. Um, Before they start entering the tunnel and experiencing the love and beauty of the other side, a unearthly realm which may consist of buildings and plants and animals, but it's still different. It's similar and different, and they're interacting with their deceased loved ones, deceased pets. And why would they want to come back when they feel such intense love? I remember talking to a person who had a near-death experience, and she said to me, Bob, the love I felt during my near-death experience, it was like looking in the eyes of your first born child magnified 10 million times. That's the love that I felt when I had my NDE. Now, that's not a brain event. The brain doesn't do that. We don't experience it during life. Why should we experience it during an NDE unless there is something that is causing that sense of love and and compassion and that's what I can't understand, the distinction between the symptoms of an NDE and versus a non-NDE, and how dramatically it changes people overnight in such unique and profound ways that it leads to career changes. And look, it also can create problems at home too, because the person is often changed so dramatically behaviorally in terms of their belief systems, etc., based on their NDE. They're behaving different. They're reading different things now. They're talking about different things that they never did before. They're down the rabbit hole.
That's right. And people
They
say, you
become,
weren't the person I married.
yeah,
Well,
they become truth seekers.
mhm.
And but it often creates problems to the point where one study I read said that 70% of people who have an NDE wind up having a divorce within 7 years, which is higher than the national average of about 50%, but nevertheless, it's statistically significant. So um, there are tremendous positives to the NDE proving the afterlife, but there are also some negative aspects to it as well, or can be negative in some certain minority cases.
Yeah. I know we can grieve for that experience. And I know there's been people that they'd rather be over there than here, and it's hard to readjust to life. I wanted to just confirm to watch your film, you can go to consciousness.media, correct? That'll lead us to Gaia. You can get the for 7 days. And then what can we find on your website, bobdavisspeaks.com?
Well, you could read about the articles that I've written. You could find the information about the books as well and where to purchase it. I've written numerous articles on near-death experiences, Kundalini awakenings, um, even UFOs, which is another interest of mine. But so bobdavisspeaks.com, there's links that'll bring them right to the books, right to the film, and right to the articles where they could learn more about it.
Fantastic. I do say you're like the Energizer Bunny. What's your next project? Do you have one, or are you going to take a little break?
Uh, uh, a little break, but I'm starting to work on our next documentary. It's a docu-series. The first one was kind of like the foundations, where we cover a variety of topics. Now we're going to focus in on the near-death experience and out-of-body experience, where we interviewed the people I mentioned, like Jeff Long, Bruce Grayson, Eben Alexander, and PMH Atwater and other experts in the field of NDE research. And we're going to condense that into an hour long feature documentary.
Thank you for all you do. Any closing words for our listener or our viewer today before we say goodbye?
Well, I want to congratulate your viewers for choosing this podcast to watch. Uh, I've become so discouraged with the quality of podcast interviews that are out there. They're few and far between in terms of good quality ones. And I congratulate them for being here, watching you and watching your show. Um, this is one of the best shows, certainly on the topic of NDEs, the best show on NDEs that I know of. And you do just a superb job. And those who are watching you are to be congratulated for selecting this show as one of the shows that gets their attention. Uh, know that the near-death experience is real. Know that there is an afterlife, or at least if you're not 100% certain, be 99% certain. Um, but read and be an educated consumer about this phenomenon, which is valid. And you should discuss it with other people who've had NDEs. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, but there are many people who have it. And I encourage you to find individuals who have experienced it to learn more about it, and certainly to continue watching Sandra Champlain on We Don't Die Radio, an exceptional show.
You're the best. Thank you very much for sharing all of that and also sharing that about the show. And those of you who have had near death experiences or want to find out more, also our friends at IANDS.org. That's the International Association for Near Death Studies. They have chapters all around the world. And of course, now Zoom groups all over so you can be involved. I want to remind everyone that you can visit bobdavisspeaks.com, find out so much about what he's up to and into. Go to consciousness.media to watch that film. Bob, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Sandra, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you again. I hope we could do this more often. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I loved it. My heart is filled with joy. Absolutely, it is. For our listener or our viewer, thank you for being here today. A reminder, my home base is wedon'tdie.com. I encourage you to enter your name and email address at the bottom of the page. It says you get the first few chapters of my book. The secret is it's the entire book. If you are somebody experiencing grief, chapter 10 is how to survive grief. Gives some really good tools and some information about what's happening within us when we grieve. And also there's afterlife information, of course. And then how do we have a powerful life while we're here? So it's like a handbook for living. And 2 p.m. Eastern time, every single Sunday, going into our 6th year now, we offer our free Sunday gathering. It's so inspiring, so fun, so empowering. There's music, there's a speaker, and then the last 45 minutes is a medium demonstration. So it's just wonderful to see how close our loved ones are to us. You're never alone. You're surrounded by love. Your life matters. It truly does. So I'm Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. Stay involved. That little ego brain will want to tell you this isn't real, but quiet down, slow down, act as if it is, because one day we'll open our eyes, have that 360-degree view that Bob was talking about, be reunited with loved ones and pets, and all will be well. So I really want to thank you for watching or for listening, and we'll see you again soon.